What if you were born 50,000 years ago? As a Neanderthal, could you survive in a world of endless cold, hunger, and predators? Tar was born at the end of winter, the most dangerous time of year. In the Paleolithic, this almost always meant a high risk of death. According to paleoanthropologists, infant mortality among Neanderthals in winter could reach 30 to 40%. The reasons are clear: hypothermia, infections, lack of fatty food, and milk deficiency in exhausted mothers. Average winter temperatures in Pleistocene Europe could drop to -10 degrees Celsius or lower. Caves and rock shelters provided only partial protection. Moisture, drafts, and weak firelight made it nearly impossible to stay warm for long. Childbirth was especially dangerous. Neanderthals had narrow pelvises and newborns with large heads. This made labor difficult and often life-threatening for women. Skeletal remains from Shanidar, Iraq, La Farassy, France, and other sites show multiple pelvic deformations, indicating a high likelihood of complications and blood loss. Tar's mother survived. She was weak, but able to drink warm water and eat a bit of boiled meat. His father kept the baby close to the fire, wrapped in hides. The women brought snow to wipe the body, dried moss, and warmed water. There was no formal system of care. It was a collection of observations, tradition, and instinct. Keep the baby warm. Don't let the body freeze. Feed and support the mother. Never leave the newborn alone. Crude forms of hygiene and caregiving are supported by archaeological findings. For example, at the La Chapelle-aux-Saints site, a burial of an adult Neanderthal shows signs of long-term care, suggesting that concern for the weak already existed. Joint burials of children and women also suggest a shared effort in infant survival. Tar's first days passed in smoke, cold, and silence. He was unaware of it, but every breath he took depended on others, on the warmth of the fire, on the efforts of the women, and on whether food would be found by evening. During the first weeks of life, no one called him by name. He was simply the child. Only if he survived would he become part of the group. From then on, he belonged to them, and now he had to grow. Tar spent the first years of his life within the cave and its immediate surroundings. It wasn't just a shelter. It was his entire universe. Warmth, the smell of smoke, muffled footsteps, the sound of chewing on bones, and the rare voices of adults. Among Neanderthals, children were not raised in the modern sense. They were simply never left alone, not because anyone forbade it, but because stepping away from the fire meant leaving the zone of safety. There were predators, cold, and the unknown. Archaeological evidence shows that Neanderthals organized their living spaces around the fire, the central point for sleep, food, and protection. Children's remains are often found in the same layers as adults, supporting a collective caregiving model. Learning happened without words. Tar simply observed, his father sharpening stone, his mother spreading hides, older children slicing meat, gathering bark, or repairing clothing. Words were rarely used. He learned through action and consequence. By the age of 6, Tar began accompanying his mother to collect firewood and snow. He was shown what to touch and what not to. Roots meant food. Some berries meant poison. A smooth stone was a weapon. A loose slope meant danger. There were few mistakes, not because everyone was cautious, but because mistakes could mean death. If you fell, if you froze, if you got lost, no one came looking. On a population level, Neanderthals had extremely high childhood mortality. According to paleogenetic studies, up to 40% of children die before the age of 10. By the age of 7, Tar already knew. Silence meant safety, fire was the center, and food was never offered twice. Tar had an older brother. He wasn't a teacher and didn't give instructions, but he became Tar's main guide into the surrounding world. Their father was usually away, hunting with the other men. Care for the younger ones fell to the women and older children. It wasn't a rule, it was a necessity. Tar first left the cave with his brother. He showed him where the slope might collapse, where to hide from the wind, where the ice cracked, and where it could hold. They searched together for moss, dry branches, watched the birds closely. Evidence confirms that Neanderthal children developed functional autonomy from an early age. The placement of tools and bones in settlement layers shows that children participated in daily activities, gathering materials, initial processing, and firekeeping. The brother never explained why something had to be done. He just did it, and Tar repeated. They could lie for hours in the brush, watching a rabbit's movements. Learning lasted the entire day, without a single word. In the evening, they ate by the fire equally, not by command, but by habit. Research into the auditory areas of the Neanderthal brain suggests they had limited capacity for articulated speech. Knowledge was most likely passed through actions and demonstration. The brother would sometimes give Tar fragments of bone or flint. He taught him how to create a sharp edge, how to secure it in a shaft, how to bend a branch to make a snare. These were the simplest traps: pits, stones, tensioned sticks. The tools were crude, but functional. Even a child was expected to master them. This is how applied literacy formed. There was no concept of too early. There was only, can you do it? Then it's time. The bond between Tar and his brother wasn't based on talk. It was built on coordination. If one moved, the other followed. If one froze, the other knew something was wrong. No one called it friendship, but in an environment where a mistake could be your last. This kind of coordination was the foundation of survival. When Tar was about 10 years old, his brother died. It happened during a hunt. They were chasing a large animal, most likely a reindeer. At one point, the animal suddenly changed direction and knocked his brother off his feet. He hit his head on a rock. Death was almost instant. The body wasn't left behind. Despite the danger, the men returned for him. The decision wasn't debated. It was part of an unspoken order. Studies show that at several Neanderthal sites, for example, La Ferracie in France, remains have been found that indicate deliberate body transport. Even when death occurred far from camp, the deceased was brought back to shelter. This required effort and, in itself, reflected the person's importance to the group. The body was cleaned with snow. Bloodied clothing was removed, dirt brushed off. He placed in a shallow pit at the edge of the camp and covered with stones. Next to him, they placed a spear and a piece of meat. No one cried. There were no words, but there were actions. Such burials cannot be called ritual in the modern sense, but the presence of objects with a body suggests the beginnings of symbolic thought. This is typical of later Neanderthals. They had no religion, but likely had memory, and they knew how to separate the living from the dead. The burial served multiple functions: to protect the body from animals, to symbolically affirm the person's belonging to the group, to help others register the loss. For Tar, this was his first personal loss. He couldn't express what he felt, but he changed. He grew quieter, more withdrawn. He sat alone more often, played less. He began to look at the world differently, not as a child, but as someone who had realized that life could end without warning. After his brother's death, Tar took one of his teeth. He drilled a hole in it using a stone tool and hung it on a tendon cord. It wasn't jewelry. It was a reminder, perhaps the first in his life. From that day on, Tar's world changed. His childhood was over. Ahead lay a different life. But that is another story.